Watch the ride.
Hey everybody, so the question is, what is the best engine size for a motorcycle? Now, the thing is, it's very different for people and what they want out of a bike, and it's also different from what you need out of the bike and what sort of bike it is and as to why it would have what size an engine it does or doesn't have. So this isn't, universal. Well, let's go through the grades. 50cc, mopeds and geared bikes. Both, yeah, okay, they can be fun, they can be good round town, but you need to go onto a 40-mile-an-hour road, and, well, no, some of them could do 40, but you're not supposed to at 16. I talked about that in my 50cc versus 125 video. They're being pushed if they're going a decent speed. 125cc's, absolutely fantastic. Not great on a dual carriageway long term, but around town and for the short, squirts on the dual carriageways and stuff, sitting at 70, 65, 70. And there are bikes that will go a little bit over that as 125s. Great bikes. Really, really good fun. However, most of us don't stick there, and there is a reason for that. It's nice to be able to go faster than the speed limit, and it's nice to be able to get to the speed limit in, a reasonable amount of time. I'll get to talking about, this bike, but an example is, this bike is not particularly that happy over 70 miles an hour like a 125. However, where a 125 will take maybe 15 seconds plus to get to 60, this will get to 60 in 4 or 5, depending on how vigorous you are. So you're not getting a lot more top end, but you are getting a lot more usable speed in between, and that's why the DRZ is really good for around town, because you've got power and acceleration, but it can still go a bit faster. But we'll get back. So 125s, fun bikes, can be used for long-term use. You don't have to progress beyond that, and that's why the A licence exists. Equally, I think the A licence is a complete waste of time. You might as well go for your A2, because it's basically going to cost you the same amount, or am I misunderstanding that? Because I've heard that it costs the same amount as a licence, and I've heard some people saying it's the same as a CBT. The 125 to 300 range, 250 range, that? The problem with those bikes is, they're great. They tend to be quite light, quite nimble. They don't tend to be hugely faster than a 125 in my experience. They're definitely faster, but not rip-roaringly different. And in the UK, they make no sense, because if you're on a CBT, you can only own a 125, and if you're on an A2, you're not going to want a 250. Well, you might. There's plenty of people that a 250 works perfectly for, and it depends on the different types of 250s out there. This is the problem. I'm just going to offend people if I'm saying something's not as good as something else, even though it's just my opinion. Yeah, okay, so 250, I believe the Suzuki 250s are getting, about 25 brake horsepower? That's not even, it's just about half of what you can have in an A2. I don't see a lot of people doing that, but the older generation, in my experience, like with the Van 200 and stuff, they're very happy with 200s and stuff like that, and it suits their needs perfectly. So don't think that just because you're young and you like everything that's fast, that's what everyone else wants, because it just isn't true. Should we say 400s? Yeah, 500s. It varies. You see, this is a 400. Well, it's actually a 440 because I put the kit in it, but this is a 400, and it is pretty useless on a motorway. Yeah, it'll do it. But it's pretty not fun on the motorway. But that's to do with the gearing. If you get a 400 sports bike with 6 gears that's geared differently, that's going to be a very different story on the motorway and probably handle it absolutely fine. And in fact, 400cc sports bikes can be, well, I've only ridden one, I think, but from my understanding, they can be really good, because they're, you got a light frame, you got a powerful enough engine, and you tend to get good grip and stuff with them, and they've got good agility, so they're a really good sort of middle of the range amount. But the companies seem to have turned their backs on 400s a bit. Was it in the 80s or the 90s that 400s were more of a thing? And then we'll add on to the back of that 500s in the A2 category. They can be really good bikes, have plenty of power, plenty of speed for getting around on the road, enough to get you in trouble, but not anything too silly. That's also going to keep your price of your insurance and everything down. So 500s in the top of the A2 sort of range, very usable. You don't need anything more than that. Then I've said in the past, you don't need anything more than 125, and technically you don't, but you would love to have a bit more generally. And that's not for everyone. I love 125s, but Jesus, I still enjoy having bigger bikes. It does add something more to it. But in other ways, it makes things more boring, because when you're going around town, you're just in 1 or 2 gears, pootling along, and it's like this. It's just like, now I've got to go down a gear, and now there's more to do with Derek and the gearing again, but whatever. Then we get into the 600s, and sports bikes and things like that. You do get 650s, obviously, if you get something like a V-twin, but 600s is, when it comes to sports bikes and other sorts of bikes, is a good place. It's middle ground, they're fast. Now, depending on what 600 you get, some will be, fast, and some will be stupidly fast for a 600. How is this only a 600? And even though 600 is one of the biggest categories here, I don't think there's any more I can say about it, because it's just such a staple. And I think the reason why 600cc is such a staple is because of the way that it sits in the middle of the range. All the things are on average. Your insurance is slightly cheaper than 1,000, your fuel economy is better than 1,000, it's not as fast as 1,000, it goes on and on. It puts it in the middle. And I think we can probably say the same things between 600 and 750. Yeah, I think so, because 750s, they've got a bit more oomph than the 600s, but with not a lot of the extra weight and stuff, so they're good bikes. So then we got like 800s, 900s, where they tend to be oddball, well not oddball, but different types of bikes. You don't get like an 800cc sports, but you do get 800cc sports bikes, and we're talking about there are some out there, of course there are. But my point is, when I think of an 800, I tend to think of something that's more tourer orientated, and I think the reason they do that is because it gives you more power, to have more low down grunt, to have that more cruising comfort. As I say, I'm generalising a lot here, and I realise in some ways what I'm saying is going to work, and in some ways it's not, but it's all dependent. But I'm just giving my views. There are very fast sports bikes at the high 900s and in the 900s, but then we're going to get to the next milestone of 1,000, the litre bike, the thing that everyone goes on about. Yeah, 1,000cc bikes are fast and they don't need to be that fast on the road. You really can't use that much power, and in my opinion, in a 600 on the road is more fun, because you actually get to use the gears and the revs a bit more. First, second gear on a 1,000cc with, a reasonable fistful, you've just broken the national speed limit. There is nothing wrong with wanting that bike, because if you want to be riding around on that 1,000cc because it's, you can put it in 6th and it will just cruise comfortably and powerfully, I totally get that, yeah. But, on the road, for like my style of riding, 1,000cc just doesn't, I don't want to sit there like, I like playing with the engine, I like playing with the gears. So I do like 1000s for their just insane thrill factor, but I'd rather take a 600 over 1,000 if I was owning it and paying for it. So over 1,000, well, there are some 11s, but getting into the 12, 13 range, now you're talking, well, more toury stuff. There are some sportier bikes up around that range, but they tend to be sports tourers. Your Hayabusas, your ZX14s, that sort of stuff. These are... I totally forgot about the things like the KTM RC8 and the Ducati 1200s. These are like full-on big sports bikes, but they're not very common in that size. There's not many of them. Most of the big brands go for 1,000, not 1,200. Because this is the thing, the Hayabusa to me, because I've ridden one, I've given it a full fist of beans, and it isn't anywhere as electric, fast feeling as like 1,000. It feels slower. But the point is, it just pulls hard at any point, and it keeps pulling, and it keeps pulling, and it just doesn't stop. And Hayabusas, you're talking, over 190 easily. It's not the instant spinning up insaneness of like 1,000cc, like an S1000RR or an R1 or something like that. It's a much more relaxed getting up to the point. I mean, it revs up fast, but it more feels like it's just more of a continuous power, and that makes it a very nice bike for touring. And then anything above that is generally a cruiser or a Harley or something like that. And now you're getting into the realms of, why would you put an engine in it that big? It weighs 10 tons. Well, no, I do get why they put the big engines in them. It is for that low down, just cruise along thing, but I do think there are better ways of doing it than a giant, like, 2.4 litre V-twin, but that's just personal preference. Am I the only bike around today? I suspect so. Of course, the CC doesn't necessarily, I'm the only bike, doesn't really mean anything, really, when it comes to the sort of the speed, the performance, and the way that the bike is, because gearing, firing order, the angle of angle of attack, the angle of firing, and all these different things in an engine completely change the characteristics of it. Like, you can get a parallel twin and get the firing order so it fires like a V twin, so it can be done in a different way. I have got a video on different engine types, which is just a basic sort of, these are the rough ones. It's kind of like, here I'm talking about CCs in a rough way, that sometimes it's not correct, but I do that with engines. And when I say not correct, I don't mean that I got it wrong, I mean that it can be different. So that's kind of the range. Where do I think the best ones sit? Well, 125s are huge fun, and most of that comes down to the fact that when even on your 30, 40, 50 mile an hour roads, you're buzzing up through the gears, you're dropping gears for corners, you've got to think about each corner, you take it in, you want to hold momentum because you haven't got that much power to speed up on the other side of it, stuff like that. That's why 125s are super fun. They're light, nimble. The smaller a bike is, the more fun it generally is. I do think there is this sort of the curve going downwards as the CC goes up, because you have to be more serious. You don't get to play around on it. Well, you can play around 1,000, of course you can with experience, but my point is so difficult because you're going to get so many people going, I have got a 1,000cc bike and I ride it like a 125. No, you don't. It's not physically possible. In first, you can go twice the speed. Whee! Yes, you can have fun on a 200, but if you're on an A2, because you have to be at that point, why go for a 200? Go for something bigger. Unless it's something that you want, and it suits your riding style. I'm talking about my preference, okay? I wouldn't go for, if I was on an A2, I wouldn't go for a 200. I would go for a 4, a 450, now we're talking supermotos probably. Or even into the, the 500s. And that's a very good category, because you get all the cheap insurance and all of that stuff, plus you still got the ability to go those speeds. So I think that's probably the best sort of area around that mark. However, I'm not on an A2, and I don't have to have my A2 bike, which is a 500cc, restricted down to 48 brake or whatever it is. I can have more power than that from that engine size, so that's a good thing to do. If you've got full license, you can still get a 500, but get one that's not detuned, de-restricted. No, what am I trying to say? Restricted, and you've got that much more oomph. So for me, I'm not going to pin it down to a single cc range. I'm going to say that for me, the best bikes are 500s at the top of the A2, up to, depending on the style of bike, 600s for sports bikes and stuff like that. But if you're getting something that's a tourer, 800 I think is a very, very good mark. Not really ridden any 800s, and I might not if people continue to do stuff like that. So that's kind of it. I mean, I think it's basically middle range. I don't believe that 1000cc's and that are the best bikes you can have, because in my opinion, for the way that I enjoy motorcycles, they're a bit boring. I mean, yeah, no doubt, some of the most thrilling moments of my life are full throttle on a 1000cc bike. It's amazing the speed that things can do. However, in reality, and being realistic, unless you're doing that on a track, in which case I don't blame you, on the road you're going to have more fun on a 600, in my opinion, because you get to wind the engine up and get through the gears and not be doing. Well, having said that, even on a 600 you're still going to be doing speeds that could put you in prison, but not so quickly. DIVI, for instance, you can get through like 3 gears almost flat out and be going around 70, 80. You get to actually play with it a bit. I think that's the advantage over a 125, some actual grunt to overtake and pull away. I think I've covered it. It's basically, I think the middle ground tends to just be best in everything, not the best, not the worst, not the most powerful, not the least powerful, not the fastest, not the slowest. But the lightness is important. That's one thing I will say. With the engine size, if you've got a 600 but it weighs 10 tons, it's not much fun. Now this is where DIVI kind of has an issue. I love my XJ6, Yamaha XJ6 Diversion. It is a great bike, I absolutely love it for cruising around on, for going on the motorway. Fuel economy is not great when you're cruising above about 80, you know, it really doesn't noticeably drop, but it is very comfortable, and I say I love the thing, but it weighs 220 kilos. For a 600, that is heavy. So for as much as I absolutely love that for being a 600, it is not the ideal 600. Well, it is for me because my need of it is to do miles. If I wanted it to be a sports bike, it would be terrible. So let's try and give you the most boiled down answer. If you're on a CVT, the best bike is a 125, there is no question about that. Sorry if you disagree with me, that's just my opinion, and I have a video on why I think that's the case. If you're on an A2, you know, 250's a bit on the low end for me, 300's kind of getting there, but like the 500, or even like a 650 that's been restricted, and on a full license, somewhere between that 400 and 800. But obviously the style of bike that you want, the needs you have of it and everything are going to make a big difference to what is and isn't right for you and what is and isn't fun for you. As I say, we all love bikes, but for our different reasons, and thank God that's the case, because if it wasn't the case, well, I mean, imagine if everyone was just into 600cc sports bikes, all that you would get would be 600cc sports bikes, and there's so many more fun styles of bikes out there that, yeah, 600cc sports bikes are great, but it's also good to try some other things too. Variety is the spice of life after all. This channel is made possible by the support of the audience. Please check out the links in the description and all the different ways you can help support the channel. Any help is greatly appreciated.